The Institute is releasing the first small overlap front crash results for a group of 11 minicars. We implemented the more challenging small overlap test in 2012, and minicars are the worst performing group of any we've tested. 10 of the 11 models earn marginal or poor ratings. Only one minicar, the Chevrolet Spark, earns an acceptable rating in the small overlap test. Because it also earns good ratings in the Institute's 4 other crashworthiness evaluations, it earns the 2014 Top Safety Pick Award. The starting point for protecting people in any type of crash is to keep the occupant space intact. If the structure holds up well, the space around the occupants is maintained, and that allows the seatbelts and the airbags to do their job and prevent injuries. A small overlap crash can be devastating because often the main structural elements of the vehicle are bypassed. If the vehicle's not designed for this, that can lead to massive collapse of the occupant compartment and a big reduction in survival space. The performance of the Fiat 500 shows how this type of crash can seriously compromise a vehicle's structure. During the crash test, the driver's door ripped off at its hinges and opened. Doors should never open in any type of crash because of the risk of ejection. One of the worst performing vehicles in this group is the Honda Fit. The structure pretty much collapsed around the driver. The steering column moved back and away from the driver, and the driver's head slid off the airbag and struck the instrument panel directly. Intrusion in the footwell would likely lead to injuries to the leg and hip of the driver. Small, lightweight vehicles have an inherent safety disadvantage in a crash. Moving up to a larger hybrid model can provide good fuel economy and offer a significant safety boost. The Institute is releasing results from small overlap front crash tests of 12 small car models. The small overlap crash test simulates what happens when a vehicle strays over the center line and hits the oncoming vehicle in the corner, or the corner of the vehicle hits a tree or a pole. The Mazda 5 is the worst performing vehicle in this group. The occupant compartment basically collapsed. That resulted in high forces on the dummy's legs. We also saw that the steering column moved away from the driver's head. That resulted in the head sliding off the airbag and hitting the instrument panel directly. In addition, the side curtain airbag didn't deploy and the door unlatched during the crash. In real-world small overlap frontal crashes, head injuries are common. A frequent source of those injuries is the head hitting hard structure inside the car. In the Fiat 500L, the steering column moved away from the driver, taking the airbag with it. That allowed the driver's head to slide off the airbag and hit the frame of the window directly. The only vehicle to earn a good rating in this group is the Mini Cooper Countryman. Its occupant compartment held up reasonably well. The occupant's motion was well controlled, and the front and side airbags helped keep the occupant's head away from any hard structures in the vehicle. This is the first time the Institute's evaluated small overlap front crash protection for electric vehicles. The Chevy Volt held up reasonably well, earning an overall acceptable rating, but the Nissan Leaf really struggled, earning a poor rating. The structural integrity of the occupant compartment was seriously compromised. The instrument panel and steering column were pushed far back towards the driver, and in the footwell, the parking brake pedal came back 12 inches towards the driver, resulting in a high risk of leg injuries. The good news is, in neither vehicle did we see a problem with their batteries as a result of the crash. Despite the marginal and poor performers in this round of tests, many small cars are performing well. Of the 32 vehicles we've evaluated so far, 19 earned the Institute's highest safety ratings. If you're shopping for a small car, choose one of these 19 for the best safety.
Today we're releasing our latest round of small overlap frontal crash tests, which are intended to push crashworthiness to the next level. So the small overlap frontal crash test is a front crash of the vehicle against a rigid barrier, but only a small portion of the front end contacts the barrier. In this type of crash, we see lots of intrusion of the occupant compartment if it's not strong enough, and sometimes, because of the off-center forces, we see movement of the occupants inside that are a challenge for the restraint systems. The Honda Civic, both 2- and 4-door versions, earn our highest rating of good in the small overlap frontal crash test. They earned a good rating because their structures held up and didn't collapse in on the driver. The steering column was stable, so the driver airbag was able to protect the head and chest of the driver. The side airbag deployed in a timely manner to help keep the driver inside as the vehicle moved sideways as a result of the offset forces associated with the small overlap crash. The Kia Forte was the worst performer among the small cars we recently subjected to our small overlap crash test. Horrendous collapse of the occupant compartment, illustrated by collapse of the hinge pillar, footwell, A-pillar instrument panel all coming in toward the driver. Despite timely deployment of the driver airbag, instability of the steering column moved the airbag inboard so much that it provided little cushion for the driver's head. We got a curtain deployment, but the curtain needs to deploy early enough and be large enough to prevent the driver's head from hitting the side structure. A strong occupant compartment structure is an important aspect of small front overlap crash protection. Without it, you get what you see here in the Nissan Sentra. The door sills, hinge pillar, A-pillar, instrument panel all collapsed in toward the driver, putting the driver at risk of serious injury. Modern vehicles offer very good protection in a wide range of crashes. Despite that fact, we see a large number of people being seriously injured and killed in frontal crashes. So we're challenging vehicle manufacturers to come up with designs that offer better protection in this crash mode as a way of reducing the toll of frontal crashes on today's highways.
The Institute is releasing crash test results for a group of mid-size family cars. The results show how these cars perform in a new, more challenging frontal crash test, which we call a small overlap test. About a quarter of serious and fatal injuries occur in small overlap crashes. Modern cars have structure in the front end that's intended to crush in the event of a crash and keep the damage from getting back to the occupant compartment. But in a small overlap crash, this structure can be bypassed. And in that case, the damage can often extend well into the occupant compartment unless the automaker has designed to prevent that. One of the top performers in our new test was this 2013 Honda Accord 4-door. As you can see, the occupant compartment held up reasonably well without major intrusion. As a result, the steering wheel stayed in position, and that meant that the driver airbag was in position to protect the driver's head and chest in the crash. Also, the airbag, the side curtain airbag, extends far enough forward to prevent the driver's head from striking hard structures inside the occupant compartment. The Toyota Camry shows what you don't want to have happen in this crash. You can see that the front wheel has been pushed back into this hinge pillar, which is bent back into the occupant compartment. Behind that is the parking brake, which has been pushed into the driver's leg space. The windshield pillar is pushed back. That's moved the instrument panel inboard. And the steering wheel also moves inboard, so that although the airbags deploy, the driver's head just brushes off the airbag on its way to hitting the instrument panel right here. Structural performance for the Toyota Prius V was poor. You can see that there was major intrusion back into the occupant compartment, and that contributed to high forces measured on the dummy's legs and feet. When the occupant compartment collapses, then the risk of injury to occupants is much greater. Both Toyotas in this group earned poor ratings, the Camry and the Prius V. Toyota engineers have a lot of work to do to match the performance of their competitors. To recognize vehicles with superior performance across all of our crash tests, the Institute has created a new award, Top Safety Pick Plus. The Plus recognizes those vehicles with good or acceptable ratings in our new, more stringent small overlap crash test. Consumers shopping for state-of-the-art crash protection in their new vehicles should look for the Top Safety Pick Plus award. Only a handful of vehicles have been tested in the small overlap crash test so far, but the Institute will be evaluating additional models throughout the year.
The Institute is releasing new crash test results of a group of 13 small SUVs. These results indicate how well these vehicles would protect you in a crash where only a small portion of the front end of the vehicle is involved. These small overlap crashes are responsible for about 25% of the serious injuries and fatalities that occur in frontal crashes in the United States. Modern vehicles have front structures designed to absorb crash energy and keep intrusion away from the occupant compartment. In small overlap crashes, unless a manufacturer designs for it, those structures get bypassed and all of the crash energy moves rearward hitting the occupant compartment and often leading to massive amounts of intrusion. The best performers in this group are the Subaru Forester and the Mitsubishi Outlander Sport. The Forester earns a good rating, and the Outlander Sport earns an acceptable rating in the new test. By doing well, both of these vehicles earn the Institute's highest award of Top Safety Pick Plus. The Subaru Forester is the standout in this group. In fact, it's the only vehicle to ace every aspect of the Institute's small overlap test evaluation. The Subaru Forester's performance was textbook. Inside the compartment, there was very little movement of the instrument panel rearward towards the occupant, and the steering column remained stable. That helped the driver airbag protect the occupant's head and chest. The head was further protected by a deploying side curtain airbag with a lot of good forward coverage. The structural performance of the Nissan Rogue was a disaster. The hinge pillar and instrument panel were pushed so far back towards the occupant that they were almost touching the driver's seat. The driver dummy in the Jeep Patriot test made very little contact with the frontal airbag. That's because the high levels of intrusion moved the steering column 8 inches up and nearly 6 inches to the right, away from the direction that the dummy's head was moving. In addition, the side curtain airbag that could help protect heads in these types of crashes did not deploy. Small SUVs are a popular choice for fuel-saving family cars. These results show that many of the manufacturers have quite a bit of work to do to catch up to the performance of Subaru and Mitsubishi in this small overlap crash.
The Institute is releasing new small overlap front crash test ratings for 7 midsize SUVs. 2 vehicles earn a good rating, 1 is rated acceptable, 3 are marginal, and 1 is poor. The small overlap front crash test represents a front crash that almost didn't occur. Only the front corner of the vehicle crashes against its crash partner, whether that's another vehicle, a tree, or a pole. About 25% of the deaths and serious injuries that occur in front crashes among new vehicles are small overlap front crashes. The best performer among these 7 SUVs is the redesigned 2015 Nissan Murano. This is what we like to see. The occupant compartment held up well, keeping intrusion to a minimum. The driver airbag deployed and stayed with the dummy's head. The side curtain offers adequate protection to keep the dummy's head safe from contact with side structures and things outside the vehicle. Vehicles earning marginal and poor ratings in the small overlap front crash test won't protect their occupants in some front crashes. The chief problem is a structure that collapses, which in some cases defeats the airbag's ability to protect the driver's head. The Dodge Journey was the worst performer in this group. The structure collapsed, moving the driver airbag out of the path of the driver's head. The side curtain didn't deploy, so his head was at risk of injury from the structure collapsing around it. The instrument panel moved back toward him as much as 9 inches, and so did the parking brake, which gashed through the dummy's leg. The Jeep Wrangler is an unusual case in this group. Even though it earned a good rating in the small overlap front crash test, we can't recommend it. It's only rated marginal for side crash protection, and only rated marginal for whiplash protection in rear crashes. Plus, without a fixed roof, it can't provide good protection in rollover crashes, so it's ineligible for a top safety pick. Folks shopping for a vehicle in this category shouldn't forget to check the crash ratings. Not all midsize SUVs offer state-of-the-art crash protection. The good news is more manufacturers are redesigning their products to offer better front crash protection. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety is releasing new small front overlap crash test ratings for 9 midsize SUVs. The front small overlap crash test is more demanding of a vehicle's crashworthiness than the flat barrier test used by the government or the moderate overlap crash test conducted by the Institute since 1995. The Chevrolet Equinox and its twin, the GMC Terrain, were the only midsize SUVs to earn a good rating in the front small overlap crash test. The Toyota Highlander was rated acceptable, but the other 6 midsize SUVs were rated marginal or poor. General Motors engineers modified the Equinox and Terrain to beef up the front structure, including the driver hinge pillar. During the crash, the driver's space was well maintained. Both the Terrain and the Equinox earned good ratings in all aspects of the small overlap crash test. Structure is key in the small front overlap crash test, and it was the downfall for 6 midsize SUVs in this group. In the Mazda CX-9, the hinge pillar was pushed backward 17 inches, and the door frame was pushed so far inside the occupant compartment that the dummy's head hit it after sliding off the front airbag. The Honda Pilot was the worst performing mid-size SUV in this group. The driver's space was seriously compromised by intruding structure. In fact, the parking brake pedal moved inward 16 inches, and the steering column moved to the right 5 inches, which contributed to the dummy's head sliding right off the driver airbag. The front small overlap crash test is challenging for a lot of new vehicle designs, but automakers realize that safety is a key selling point, so they're all making changes to improve crashworthiness to earn good ratings in this test. The Institute for Highway Safety is releasing new front small overlap crash test results for 4 minivans. This is the first time these 4 vehicles have been subjected to this demanding test. Safety is an important consideration for families choosing a new car. Unfortunately, in the minivan segment, there are only 2 models that have decent protection in small overlap frontal crashes. Among the minivans we tested this year, the 2015 Toyota Sienna is the best performer. It includes structural modifications to improve front crash protection over 2014 models. Still, there's a little bit more intrusion into the occupant compartment than we like to see. It's rated acceptable overall, and when combined with an optional front crash prevention system, it's a top safety pick plus. The Nissan Quest is one of the worst performing vehicles we've ever seen in the small front overlap crash test. The structure collapsed like a house of cards. This point here moved nearly 2 feet toward the driver, trapping its left leg between the seat and the instrument panel. We had to cut the seat out in order to remove the dummy, and then we needed a crowbar to pry the right foot loose. Not surprisingly, the forces measured on the left leg were so high that a real person experiencing that would be lucky ever to walk normally again. You wouldn't want to be in the Chrysler Town & Country or its twin, the Dodge Caravan, in this kind of a crash. The structure collapsed around the driver. This portion here moved more than a foot into the driver's space. At the same time, the steering wheel moved to the right, so the dummy's head slid off the airbag and impacted against the instrument panel. When the structure collapses, injuries are more likely. In the case of the Town & Country, the dummy's left leg was gouged by the intruding parking brake pedal, and its knee was severely cut by a bracket underneath the instrument panel. The dummy skin's a lot tougher than human skin, so this doesn't bode well for real humans in this type of crash. Front small overlap crashes are especially tough on minivans. That's because they're typically built on car frames, but they're wider and heavier, so more of their structure is located outboard of the energy-absorbing frame rails. Still, Honda and Toyota demonstrate that it's possible to provide decent crash protection in this type of crash for minivans. If you're shopping for a new vehicle, choose one with the best overall crash test ratings, and also one that has a front crash prevention system. These vehicles earn our Top Safety Pick Plus award for their state-of-the-art safety.
Automakers like to one-up each other in ads on who builds the toughest large pickup trucks. So the Institute decided to take a look at the safety of this vehicle class. We conducted tests to evaluate the protection to occupants in rear impact, rollover, side, and frontal crashes. So the results are a mixed bag. The Ford F-150 is the only vehicle to receive a good rating in the small overlap test, and furthermore, it's the only one to receive a Top Safety Pick award. 3 of the other trucks received acceptable ratings, and 5 of the trucks only received a marginal rating. We evaluated 2 body styles for each of these pickup trucks, the extended cab and the larger crew cab, which has 4 doors and a full-size rear seat. Because early testing on the 2015 Ford F-150 showed structural countermeasure differences between the crew cab and the extended cab. The crew cab received a good rating, whereas the extended cab only received a marginal rating. Ford improved the extended cab for 2016, and it now earns a good rating for the small overlap frontal crash, along with the crew cab version of the vehicle. The Ford F-150 is the only large pickup truck to get this good rating, and when equipped with the optional forward collision warning system, it is also a top safety pick. For 2 of the models, we did see differences between the crew cab and extended cab versions. The Silverado 1500 and Tundra crew cab models performed worse than the extended cab. The extended cab received acceptable ratings, whereas the crew cab versions only received marginal ratings. The worst performing truck we tested was the Ram 1500, with both cab versions receiving poor structural ratings and marginal overall ratings. There was so much structural collapse that the footwell, brake pedal, and lower instrument panel pushed into the dummy's legs. There was likelihood of serious injury to the lower legs, ankle, and feet in the dummies. In a real-world small overlap crash, drivers in a Silverado, Ram, or Tundra would need help freeing their legs from the wreckage. The injuries they sustain could require months of rehabilitation. Pickup trucks are advertised to be these rough and tough vehicles, but the results show that some manufacturers have a long way to go to match the good across-the-board safety performance of the Ford F-150.